Hello, everybody. I'm Evan Kamiko, and this is The Toss-Up. Each week, join myself and an expert line panel dissect the latest sports news from some of the nation's most elite college programs here in Bloomington to the biggest stadiums and stages around the world. This week, we are talking all things Black History Month at IU and around the sports world. Stick around because we got a great show for you coming up on The Toss-Up. As the month of February is Black History Month, today on The Toss-Up, we are honoring the legacy of all black athletes that have changed the sports landscapes. Joining the show this week to discuss Black History Month is our very own Anthony McLean, Christian Oates, and Hank Joseph. Guys, welcome to, and welcome for your first time to The Toss-Up.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
And you two, I mean, we've seen you like last week.
Yeah, I've been here, done that, man. It's good to be back, though.
Hank,
And
we haven't seen you in a minute.
I'm in a very niche market of the toss-up, I would say.
The golf market, which we love, and that's coming up in a couple of months. But I want to kick it off, Christian, with you. Which black athlete had the biggest impact here at IU?
I feel like it has to be George Taliaferro. You know, we talked about it a few weeks ago on here. Overall, he performed on the field in all the different positions that he played, but off the field, he dealt with so much with, you know, not being treated right and sort of not being treated like a human. So all how much he powered through, just big props to him, and he has to be my spotlight.
Anthony?
You know, I'm gonna give it to Isaiah Thomas. You know,
IT.
he's a baller. You know what I mean? And he's one of the most notable athletes that ever came out of IU. And whenever it comes to how did an IU athlete basically translate to their professional sport, I think he did it the best. If out of most of the athletes that have ever been at IU, I'd say.
Hank.
Well, I'm going to take us back 130 years here to Preston Eagleson. I know it's a different name. Probably not one that anybody's ever heard before. They actually just changed Jordan Avenue to Eagleson Avenue, so got to do a little bit of research about him, and he was actually the first ever black athlete at Indiana University. 1893, played baseball, basketball, and football, and he really paved the way, you know, and we'll talk about that in a little bit later, but paved the way for IU athletes, started a team that was just all black athletes called the University Team, and they weren't even acknowledged by IU until 1931, so big thanks to Preston Eagleson.
And you actually segued perfectly into the next question.
How about
So we'll come back to you for that. But Anthony, how have black athletes here at IU paved the way for the athletes today?
I mean, just sacrifices, basically. You know, there's a lot of things that back in the past, you know, not just black athletes at IU, just black people in general had to put up with. And the fact to still have the patience and the diligence to just keep moving forward and just to keep playing is something that you got to really respect, because, you know, a lot of people that don't really have a lot of discipline or that strong willpower will probably cave and probably stop playing the sports, go back home, you know, but they've pushed themselves out of their comfort zone because they know somebody else will get inspired, then somebody else will get inspired, and then, you know, then they'll just have to let us in one day. And I think that's what a lot of those early athletes here at IU knew. And that's why they kept putting up with things that, you know, they shouldn't have been putting up with in the first place.
Christian? Yeah,
I'm thinking it's the people that were always the first to do something, you know. Think about back to when there were no black basketball players at IU. It takes a lot of courage and sacrifice, as Anthony mentioned, to be able to say you're the first to something. The amount of slander you're going to encounter, how much, no matter how good you are, and you have to deal with that, and it takes a lot of sacrifice and just a lot of heart to want to be the first and inspire other people to keep going in the future.
Hank?
Yeah, you guys mentioned it. Inspiration, courage, and persistence, I think, is a huge word that, you know, doesn't really get tossed around enough, just because you have to keep going. You know, that first time that you are insulted or you face diversity, you can't just back down and, you know, go back to your room and just cry about it. You've got to keep going. You've got to persevere on and, you know, get through it. And that's why we're all able to be here today.
Moving on, Christian, which black athlete has had the most impact on you from IU?
I'm going to go pretty recent, you know, Trace Jackson Davis. I'm from Indianapolis, and he went to Center Grove High School, which is around 30 minutes away from where I went. So just seeing how great he is, and not only representing Indiana and Central Indianapolis, but being one of the strong athletes, and he's definitely going to have a big impact in history at this school as we look, 50 years, 60 years in the future, as one of the stronger athletes and black athletes in specific.
Hank?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't an IU fan until, recently, until I started going here. And I would have to go with Bill Garrett. I walk into the field house. Sorry if I took that one from you, Anthony. I apologize. But Bill Garrett, I mean, being the first ever black basketball player, not only at Indiana, but the first ever to play in the Big Ten. I mean, that takes guts and that takes a lot of courage. And he was able to do it and play varsity and, be the guy that younger kids could look up to back then. So I would have to go with Bill Garrett.
Anthony?
Give me Eric Gordon. I mean, he was a ball. He's been a baller. He still basically is. Like, he's in the back end of his career, but whenever he was in his heyday at IU, my brother used to go here whenever he was playing, and he told me all the stories about him, and he would show me some of his highlight tapes, and that always had an impact on me because I was just like, that was my introduction to IU. So just seeing like a player like Eric Gordon, just seeing like, okay, this is different. Like, people come here and they go to places like the NBA. People can come here academically, and that takes you to places that you never thought you would before. So it's just really cool, seeing like, players translate into like professional sports, especially whenever they're from like, your brother's alumni. It's really cool.
I'll throw out two names really quickly. Antoine Randall L. of the Pittsburgh Steelers is a big one. Second one, head coach here, Mike Woodson.
Yeah.
Can't forget about him and the way that he paved forward in honoring Coach Knight's legacy from the past and bringing that to Indiana basketball today. So a lot of bright things ahead for Indiana basketball. Moving on, let's look at some of the young athletes today, some of the players that we cover on a daily basis. What young black athlete do you think will be, one of the biggest names in the future? Christian?
I'm sort of going to go with the cop-out answer. I feel like all the athletes that we have here, just thinking about it, we grew up in a generation where, we don't really bat an eye to the diversity that we have at our school and in the sports world, but just thinking about how mixed it is, and if you take a list of everything, see all the different diversities that you have, you're really going to be surprised and just smile looking at how diverse this sports world and how diverse the fan base is and overall as a whole, Indiana University.
Anthony?
Do you mean specifically IU players?
Specifically IU players.
Then I would say Trace. Trace is he's got a chance to make it big, and that would just be a statement for IU again. Just I think anybody who is able to perform professionally. There are also a few wrestlers, black wrestlers, that are doing really well and have competed overseas. So we're getting still a lot of representation here at IU. But I would just say out of popularity, definitely Trace.
Hank?
Yeah, and I mean, I look at, especially football players like Tywan Mullen and then the McCullen brothers, and obviously Tywan's brother's coming in here pretty soon. I look at them trying to continue that tradition at IU and not just being black athletes at IU, but having their brothers come in and continue to, wear the cream and crimson and support Indiana and wear Indiana, loud and proud on their chest. That's really the guys that I look up to, the football team especially.
Mm-hmm. And a big name I'm going to throw out there, Kristen Hayden on the dive team. She who's recently won a silver medal, somebody who is a cornerstone for that program. She's the leader, pretty much wins everything she does. And, that's somebody, and that's a program that doesn't get the light. We've talked about that program on the toss-up, but we mentioned Kristen Hayden, but I want to give her the respect that she deserves because of how she's transcended that program as well as that sport and brought it to relevancy. Last thing before we head to break, I want to ask about what has Indiana been doing here at school to honor Black History Month. Anthony, we'll start with you.
Oh, I've seen definitely a lot of social media activity representing black people. I've seen different things in the auditorium, different like ensembles through the Neil Marshall Center and everything like that. And I've also just seen certain just posters, and things like that have to do with like black inclusion. And it's really cool. And even that, I don't know if it's still there, but the Black Lives Matter, I don't know if you want to call it a decor, basically on the street. That was really cool. That was something that I really liked. So things like that is just always appreciated. It's just like small little things like that just makes like people feel welcomed, and I like that.
Hank?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. The Neil Marshall Black Culture Center is such a huge addition to the school, and one of those things that I didn't really know that much about, until coming into this February, and I saw all the panels that they were offering and all the different discussions, and they're doing screenings of different movies. So I'm really thankful to have the Neil Marshall Center here and be able to go and learn, about all these people that you would never get a chance to know without the center, and they really do a good job, and the Afro-American studies here are just fantastic.
Christian.
The basketball team has done a really great job at the home games during timeouts and halftime. On the big screen, they've showed different black athletes that were trailblazers and history makers here at this school, but also the game versus Maryland. They have a special honoring black excellence jerseys that they look amazing, by the way. I love jerseys. Yeah. But I think they look great, and it's a cool thing that they're doing, switching up the plain cream and crimson just to do something different and switch up the programming.
It's so funny because I was about to say that. I had that right in my head. I was like,
it.
Last night the basketball team played Maryland, and they wore those jerseys with the flowers on them, and they're just spectacular jerseys. Some of the favorite I've seen. So Christian, Anthony, Hank, stick around because coming up after break, we got them back on the panel to talk about Black History Month in sports. Stick around because we'll be right back. Welcome back. Still on the panel, Hank Joseph, Anthony McLean, and Christian Oates. And now we're going to get into broader topic, black athletes in professional sports. So, Anthony, we'll start with you here. What athlete has had the biggest impact in sports?
Give me Michael Jordan. Whenever you're just talking about pure icon, man, I've never really seen any other black athlete like Michael Jordan, just based on his iconicism and how he's just recognized throughout the world. I mean, probably Kobe even, I could put him up there too, just based on just how much impact they've had, not only in America but just in the world. Because Kobe, he partly speaks Italian, so he has a really big Italian presence too. And Jordan obviously has his presence not only because he's recognized as maybe one of the greatest basketball players of all time, if not the. So I would say definitely Jordan and Kobe. Those are my favorites.
Hank?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question. There's obviously the guys like Jackie Robinson, who did pave the way. But for me, and you mentioned I'm a golf guy, I guess I got to stick with it. Tiger Woods was such a big, such an impactful guy, not just in the sport of golf, but just in sports in general, showing that, it doesn't matter where you came from, no matter what your social, economical background is, he wanted to be a golfer. His dad wanted him to be a golfer, and you know what he did? He went out and became the best that there ever was. And at first he was a little bit shy to take the brunt of all of Black America onto his shoulders, but once he fully embraced it, and golf embraced it, and it's made golf such a better place for everybody.
Christian?
I'm going with John Taylor. This one's back from the 1900s, but he was the first black athlete to win Olympic gold, and it kind of goes with the times today, but just showing that even back then, being the top of the sport, he was a track athlete out of the whole world, and getting the global recognition as one of the top athletes, that's something huge.
Mm-hmm. And Hank, you brought up a bit Jackie Robinson. That's somebody who, I can go on and on about him, but I'm sure everybody on this panel and everybody at home knows exactly who Jackie Robinson is. But one of the things that Jackie did was he paved the path. What other athletes, and who specifically paved a path for athletes today? We've already mentioned a lot of great names. Christian, I want to start with you.
That was a great segue, by the way. I like
Thank
that.
you.
I'm thinking that, building on what I said the first time around, the athletes that build off of the first people that did something and are the ones that really make an impact, You think about your Kobe Bryants and your LeBron Jameses, they are worldwide phenomenons, and even in other sports. You think about Lamar Jackson, he's revolutionized the game. All of those guys have just sort of changed the sport that they're involved in, and made a huge impact.
Anthony?
Yeah, I was gonna talk about Lamar, man.
Still talk about Lamar.
Yeah, let me go in a little bit in depth on Lamar. So the reason why I think Lamar is different from past black quarterbacks is not that the black quarterbacks before him or the black quarterbacks that come after him can't do what he can. I just don't think anyone thought that you could do it the way he's doing it right now, because he's basically a skill position player, like a wide receiver, running back type, build and everything, playing quarterback. And like most people didn't really want to, submit to that, but he's forced them to, because throughout Louisville and throughout high school, there have been multiple times as coaches and, GMs and other just administration figures have pushed him to like, you should be a wide receiver, you should be this, you should be that. And he's like, no, I'm a quarterback. And that's like one of the biggest things I respect about Lamar.
Hank.
I'm going to talk about Bill Russell. I think that it's kind of important, especially with what's going on in the NFL right now, that, you look at a guy who was a very successful player, 11 championships. I think that says everything you need to know about him. But then he went out to be the first black head coach to win an NBA championship. And, I think that, a lot of people, for some reason, that's some kind of stint that can't happen. But you saw with Bill Russell what he did. It's so impressive, not only on the court, but but coaching. He was able to bring these guys together and say, it doesn't matter. 1966, that's such a huge year, especially when it comes to civil rights in this country, a year after the movement. And, he went on to win an NBA championship with this team. And I think he really paved the way, not only for players, but for coaches.
Another name I want to throw out as well, Dion Sanders, is a guy that played football and he played baseball. He was one of the first, if not the first, two-sport athletes to play in the NFL and the MLB. And that's something that you see more and more today of young athletes are following that step and playing two sports, especially in college, is a big place. And plus, you saw Kyler Murray, Arizona Cardinals quarterback, got drafted by the Oakland Athletics. Russell Wilson, another guy that got drafted by the Rangers and the Yankees. That wouldn't happen if it wasn't for Dion Sanders. So I think that's a big thing.
And it wouldn't happen if it wasn't for Althea Gilbert, who won 11 Grand Slams in tennis, and then 2 years later made it onto the LPGA Tour. How about that? Nice. Not a lot of people know who she is because, Arthur Ashe is the big groundbreaker in tennis, but that's men's tennis. Althea Gilbert did it in 1954 in women's tennis, and just wanted to talk about her name.
Great name to bring up. A lot of great names. I mean, Serena Williams, Venus Williams,
absolutely.
So many names we can bring up. And let's talk specifically. Let's talk one athlete. What black athlete had the biggest impact on you personally? Anthony?
I'm going to go with Jim Brown. So back in the day, Jim Brown starred in a lot of movies. And, he still does TV to this day. And one of the things that I liked about Jim Brown, because not only was he a good actor, not only was he an amazing running back, arguably the best running back of all time in the NFL. Like, are you kidding me? And then on top of that, he was also a voice. He wasn't a quiet guy, and he also was part of that movement of black athletes, including Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who were part of the Civil Rights Act movement and had like a big voice during that. So I just think that's a big deal.
Christian?
I got to go with Chris Paul. So inside, my middle name is Paul. So as a kid, Christian Paul, that automatically made me stick onto him. But then seeing what he did on the court and how great of an athlete he is, seeing the All-Stars, Skills Challenge, all the great things he did, I've just had a great admiration for him and all the great things he's done with the NBPA and helping with social justice all around the world. He's been my guy, favorite athlete of all time.
Hank? Yeah,
growing up for me, it was always Henry Aaron. Hank Aaron, as everybody knows him, and no, I wasn't named after him, even though sometimes I lie and say that I was. He had such a big impact, especially in the city of Atlanta with the civil rights movement. He came to the league in the 1950s, and he had to play in the Negro League, so it took him time. He had to go through the same trials and tribulations, not as bad as Jackie, but just the same. And he played in Atlanta. He's from Mobile, so Hank Aaron to me was always a huge impact on black athletes, and he just went ahead and hit the most home runs ever before Barry. Excuse me.
I got 2 to 3 names. I'm going to make sure I have all 3. But Ernie Banks, absolutely. Michael Jordan. And the third one, Derek Jeter, somebody who is biracial as well. And the big thing about, I grew up in New Jersey. Everybody idolized Jeter. That was my guy. I was number 2 because of him when I was little. I played shortstop because of Derek Jeter when I was younger. So he's somebody that's been so important to me and such a good role model in general, kind of to talk about. And like we've talked about earlier, he's what all these young athletes today look up to, enshrined in Yankee history. He's someone that's absolutely huge. And the young athletes today, that's a name that they all talk about. Now, what young athletes to you guys are changing their sport like Derek Jeter did with the shortstop position? Christian?
I'm going to go over to WWE. You know, say what you want, but they made history last year. WrestleMania 37, Bianca Belair versus Sasha Banks. They were the first 2 black women to compete in the main event of WrestleMania. Not only was it a great match, great payoff to the storyline, et cetera, but they also won an ESPY for that, and it's showing how you can still be a waymaker and pave the way for athletes of the future. And also, as far as I'm concerned, I did some extra research. They are the first ever black athletes in general. So not only being the first black women, but just the first black athletes overall.
Anthony?
Give me Steph Curry, man. Steph Curry is changing the game of basketball right now, before our eyes, because they're starting to pump out these lottery picks that are playing a lot like Curry. You know, one of the biggest names that I can bring up right now that plays a lot like Curry to me is LaMelo. Just because, ever since LaMelo started pulling up from deep, back in high school tapes, I was like, that's a lot like what Curry does. And now we're seeing Curry pulling up from the logo in the All-Star games and everything like that. No one ever, that's not something that was really allowed back in the day. You know, your coach would probably chew you out after you tried to do something like that. But Curry is one of the only people who can do it, and now he's inspiring people to try it. And he literally got into some heat because people were criticizing his game and everything. He's like, I'm not telling y'all to shoot like that. I can only do that. So it's just, I just love Curry, man. It's so inspirational.
Hank?
Yeah, he showed in the All-Star game that he is literally the only one that can do that. I'm going to, keep it with the civil rights movement, and I'm going to talk about Jaylen Brown. He grew up in Atlanta, went to Wheeler High School, and, he had an incident when he was in high school and 18 years old. He was going to an award ceremony. He was late to school. He runs a speed light, or stop sign. Wow. And, a cop pulls him over. Jaylen's very, very respectful, and then another cop gets called, and, he gets put on the ground and gets arrested for running a stop sign. So, he decided at that point, I'm going to go to a college where I'm going to be able to study activism, learn about activism, and be an activist myself. He went to Cal Berkeley. He's very proud to have gone there. And I encourage everybody to go and watch his discussions at Harvard, MIT, at Cal as well, where, he discusses all these different things about, what he's learned and all the different experiences that black people have gone through. And, you saw him in the 2020 protest, and he led a protest in Atlanta. And I think that, he is paving the way, and he is setting, what Bill Russell and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Muhammad Ali did, way back when. He's setting that precedent now.
Mm-hmm. And some names to throw out from the tennis world because of what Serena and Venus did. You have Sloane Stephens, Madison Keys, as well as Frances Tiafoe on the men's side. These are young Americans who have had success in majors or, are climbing the rankings to have that success, and that was paved because of Serena and Venus. Last question I want to ask you guys before we wrap up. What have pro sports been doing in your eyes to celebrate Black History Month? Hank, we'll start with you.
Yeah, well, the NFL did a really cool thing this past weekend. They had the HBCU basically all-star game. And, it gave a lot of HBCU players, chances to show themselves. There was about 5 to 10 draft prospects who probably wouldn't have gotten to go to maybe a Reese's Senior Bowl or anything like that. And they got the opportunity to show their talents. And then the NBA, just had a game, HBCU game between Howard and Morgan State right before the All-Star weekend. So I think that they have done a good job of, accepting their responsibility in terms of Black History Month.
Anthony?
Since he covered most of the things that are happening in game, I'll go on social media, and there's a lot of things on social media that I see with the NBA and the NFL just promoting Black History Month. I've also seen flashback little reels and everything that ESPN and Sports Center on Instagram will post, and it's just really cool to just see clips of different very notable black athletes and everything like that, and it's just seeing their tape, and you kind of compare their tape to the new generation, and it's just wow, that kind of reminds me of this player, that kind of reminds me of that player, and you remember, oh, this was before these players, they're getting it from these guys. So you kind of see where a lot of the players' games, how they're playing it now, where they got it from back in the day, and that was really cool.
Christian, wrap us up.
I'm thinking the NBA 75, that roster that they have put together and the photo shoots that they did over All-Star Weekend, just looking at it and kind of taking a glimpse back, seeing how many black athletes that you have on them of the past, present, and future. It's a really great thing to see.
Christian, Anthony, Hank, thank you so much for such a great discussion today. That's going to do it for the show this week. Be sure to continue the discussion and follow us on Instagram at IUSTV Sports and on Twitter at IUSTV Sports. With that, there's one thing left to do, so toss it up, find out if we'll catch it, and we'll see you next week.